Hi, this is Piero Giorgio. I'm today in Thera in Santorini in Greece. Beautiful, beautiful place that I enjoy. Come whenever I can and I can afford it. Today I wanted to talk to you about Greece because Greece has been, unfortunately, one of the examples I've studied to write my book, Survive the Economic Collapse, as Greece is an early example of a country which has slowly descended into an economic collapse. And for that, it's important to look always at the history. So, for those of you who don't know Greek history, and by the way, I would like to take this opportunity to salute all my Greek friends across Greece, of course, with whom I've done business and with whom we've had great times at restaurants and at work and during holidays, and also all my Greek friends across the world in South Africa, in the Americas, in Australia, and you guys are all over the place, and you are proud of your roots, of your origins, of your history, of your culture, of your food, and this is really great, and you're great people. So, history of Greece, for those who don't know, well, of course, it goes back thousands and thousands of years. Uh, it's one of the first civilizations in the Mediterranean, obviously, and here, this is an example, by the way, Santorini, of a civilization, and not far from here in Crete, where more than 3,500 years ago, even 4,000 years ago, there were very brilliant civilizations. Of course, this one was destroyed with the eruption of this volcano, which is an interesting link to us who try to survive or prepare for events that are either unpredictable or predictable. Now, of course, everybody knows ancient Greek history, and of course, this was brilliant civilization in Attica, Athens, in the Peloponnese. Obviously, a lot of people know Sparta, but other cities as well, and in the islands. And of course, this civilization was brilliant, and it teaches us a lot of the important philosophical bases of Western civilization: democracy, rule of law. A lot of those important concepts started here. Now, another important fact about those times is, of course, while it was brilliant, you read that it also destroyed itself through war, through too much war, especially the Peloponnesian War, where it weakened itself, and of course ended up weak, which was then picked up by Alexandros the Great, who conquered one of the vastest empires across the Mediterranean. But then it also, of course, was not very of long duration because it split after Alexander's death. And of course, then the Roman Empire grew and took over Greece, which then, lasted for 800 years, then split with East and Western Roman empires and in part of Byzantium. And when Byzantium first fell to the Crusaders, Greece, or the Greek parts of the Byzantium Empire, were ruled by what they call Latin kingdoms, which were usually Italian or French or certainly Western rulers who kept the Orthodox religion. Now, uh, what really changed, of course, in Greece was that, of course, it was at this point not empires anymore. It was very local, and it was probably thriving of agriculture and fishing, and the economy was, like everywhere in the world, mostly um, agriculture and linked to the sea and to the land, which is amazing here and exceptional. Now, of course, what happened in the 15th century is that Greece started to fall under the rule of the Ottoman, which became the Ottoman Empire. And after 400 years of rule of this empire and the Turks, Greece gained its independence in the 19th century. And and of course, what happened is that through this independence, Greek was put into the problems of Europe, the problems of the Balkans, which led to World War One, among other reasons. But certainly that has an impact. And of course, World War Two, where my ancestors, Italy, invaded Greek, which was a big mistake, even on a cultural and philosophical ground, but also on military ground. My grandfather fought for Italy in Albania, trying to invade Greece. Of course, they failed. They had to get Germany to help. And certainly, my grandfather was telling me how he didn't like this war, and he certainly had a big disrespect for the Italian officers, and grew a very good respect for the Greek soldiers who defeated the Italian forces in Albania. And anyways, Greek unfortunately fell into the big civil war from 1943 to 1949 between the, let's say, the monarchists, the Republicans, and on the other side the communists. And this was a brutal and bloody civil war, which still has leaves traces here in Greece. Um, and if you add that from actually, I was thinking of the Greek people who were living in what is now Turkey, that had to move to Greece in the 1920s, early, I think 1922. There was a big problem after World War II in Greece between the Civil War, which left a lot of scars, and also all the refugees that had to move to Athens, mostly, or who moved across the oceans to Australia, England, South Africa, and the United States, and that started to weaken very much this young economy, because it was a young country, and this started to have some significant economical problems, and this explains why Greece never really did develop a very big industry, and it was mostly agricultural. It had great shipping, but mostly was agricultural, and because of the Civil War, and of course because of the Cold War, Greece was also obliged to put a sizable chunk of its budget into military expenditures. And as Greece was part of NATO, it was a sort of client state of the United States, as all NATO countries are, and therefore had to spend a lot of money to buy American especially, but also French, but mostly American equipment. This was a heavy budget. And after the Cold War, by the way, it actually continued, and this was part of the debt of Greece that Greece has today, is also part of these huge expenditures. And what's interesting to finish that short history of Greece is that in the 90s, of course, in the 80s, when Greece joined the European Union, and in the 90s, when it prepared to get into the euro, people never thought that maybe Greece was not ready economically to be part of the monetary union with Germany or maybe France. And certainly the disparities of the wages and the disparities of the economic were big. What's interesting is that as Greece joined the euro, obviously it was a boost for Greece at the beginning, because clearly suddenly Greece, with a stronger currency, could buy for cheaper a lot of the imports, such as fuel, that obviously helped the economy. But obviously also could borrow with the same interest rates as Germany, for countries that in the 70s and 80s suffered massive, of course, debt, but massive inflation, because it had to devalue the drachma to compensate for that devaluation. So what's interesting to notice is that throughout the 2000s, actually the Greek economy went extremely well. And sure, it developed debt, but it managed to invest into very, I think, world-class and first-level infrastructure. If you go to Athens, the motorways, the airport, the subways, all of that is of excellent quality. And the tourism, of course, benefited from that. And the Greek people also could take some debt, take some consumer credit for their houses, for their buying new cars, and enjoy the better life. Now, of course, the problem with debt is you have to pay it. Now, to be fair, the reason why Greece has so much debt is not because of the people or a very small part. The reason is obviously a lot with the government, which used a lot of that money for its corrupt infrastructure. A lot of people have now been found having bank accounts in Switzerland and elsewhere with a lot of money. I think there was the sister of one of the prime ministers who was discovered with a bank account with hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion dollars, and no one can explain how that money got to her. I mean, what was she doing? Sure, they came from a rich family, but that amount of money was not through playing on the internet, on the stock market, on the internet, or on the internet stocks. So clearly, there has been some corruption that was endemic in in some way all parts of the society, but mostly with the politicians. And also when the crisis started to happen around 2007, a lot of the banks who were counseling and giving advice to the Greek government, like especially there was one big bank which I'm not going to name, but everybody knows which it is, started to give advice to the Greek governments and then played against that advice and made sure that they were making money on the Greek government. So there has been an attack of the predator banks on Greece as they perceived it as one of the first economies who would suffer from the debt and from the economic crisis that was triggered in 2008, and they profited a lot from that weakness. So a lot of Greek people in the end started to suffer, and now this is what is interesting in terms of economic collapse, is that Greece is a laboratory, is clearly an example of what can happen to a country where it's pushed into economic crisis that lasts a long time. So, for example, Greek government has cut pensions. They have cut government employees' salaries, and they have pushed for unemployment help to be cut as well. So a lot of the Greek people, starting from 2006, 2007, and accelerating in 2008 to 2010, have started to suddenly not having any more the means to live. And this is a slow economic collapse because this happened over many years and it's not something that happens overnight. So there was clearly no end of the rule of law. There was clearly no mass violence in the streets while there were protesters. And there were some remnants of the Civil War where left-wing and right-wing movements started to protest and clashed with the police or with each other sometimes. And clearly, this is an example of what economies can be when the economy slowly turns down and when the state, with its authority and rule of law, also slowly contracts. And Greece is a very, very interesting example, and this is why I come, among other reasons, at least once a year to talk with people in Athens, to discuss how the economy impacts people who are suddenly losing their jobs or suddenly having their wages cut while the cost of living stays the same. Here, the cost of living is now pretty high because of the euro. So how are people making it? Well, a lot of people can't. And we start to see, of course, over the last 5 years, people live in Greece like they used to in the 20s and the 30s and the 19th century. A lot of people have moved to England, to United States, to Australia, to South Africa. A lot of people are trying to leave, sending their resumes to companies and any businesses around the world, trying to find jobs elsewhere. And a lot of people, some say it's up to 30% of the population of Athens. Certainly it's above 15%, perhaps 20% for sure, but some people say it's 30%, have actually left the city to move back in the countryside, to the islands, to their families, so that at least they can eat with the farm plots that they can, where they can grow cucumbers and tomatoes and the great food that Greece is famous for. And this is a sign of this return to the land, because the land, well managed and well tended, at least it can feed you. So maybe you won't have a career, maybe you won't send your kids to famous universities, but at least you won't starve and you won't be miserable in the city. So this is a phenomenon that I've been following, and it's a sizable phenomenon in a country like Greece, which is a medium-sized country. I think it's about 12 or maybe maximum 13, 15 million people. But I should check that before I do my videos. But anyway, the reality is that life has been tough. Now, what my Greek friends tell me is that they're of course very angry. They're angry at their government. They're angry at the banks. They're angry at the European Union. They're angry at the United States for still in this crisis pushing Greece to buy military equipment from U.S. companies. They are a bit angry at everybody, and even I discuss with taxi drivers, I discuss with people in the streets, as well as people I used to do business with in the software industry and with my customers in the media. And what is very interesting is they all say to me that they've lost confidence in the traditional parties that used to rule Greece, whether it was more towards left socialist or the central right. They are massively going to vote for more right-wing parties because, and I have no opinion on this new party. I think the name is Golden Dawn. Um, I don't know the name in Greek. But certainly these parties, they are in the streets, they are feeding the poor, they are keeping security where the police is not present. And there has been a sizable presence of foreigners in Greece. And some of those foreigners were into criminal activity, as it often happens in every country. And there's no stigma I want to give here to any particular people or foreigners, but certainly it happened. And when the police is not doing the job, well, someone has to do it. And it seems that this party has some people, militants in the streets, who clean the streets out of criminals. And that is appreciated by the people. And, when you feed and you protect people, they follow you. And certainly in the next elections, this party seems to be growing strength, growing confidence, and getting much more votes, and not only from poor or angry people, from the middle class and even from the upper class, because they see this as a solution. I cannot say if they are right or wrong, but certainly what you can notice is the current government is aggressing very strongly this party and accusing them of a lot of things which seem to be, in some cases, completely fabricated to be able to put pressure on this party and therefore discredit it for the coming or the next elections. So this is a very interesting element where economic collapse pushes into a political crisis and pushes into political violence, and which will eventually lead into violence in the streets. So my advice to everyone who's watching this video, first of all, is please share it with others. And certainly, if you have time, read my book, Survive the Economic Collapse, because it will help you, whether you're in Greece, of course, but also around the world, especially in the US or England or in English-speaking countries. You will end up like Greece, and we will all end up, because this economic crisis is unfinished and it's going to last for a long time, and it can be brutal. And in fact, I think that Greece, in fact, is turning out pretty well in the sense that they have had time to adapt to this economic collapse because it was fairly slow for them. It might not be that slow in the United States. It might not be that slow in England. It might not be that slow elsewhere in the world. And they have had time, and they have the culture of the family. They have the culture of agriculture where you stick together, you help each other, and you have food available here in the sea, in the field, and therefore at least the basics of life, water, food, protection, family, at least those are covered. This is not so in other places in the world. So keep an eye on Greece, study Greece. Perhaps if you're kind to me, read my book. But certainly this is a place we need to study, and we need to help, and we need to look, because this is the future of Europe, this is the future of Americas. And we have to be extremely cautious and learn of what works and what doesn't. So to finish, I would like to again salute all my Greek friends and all the friends of Greek origins that are seeing these videos across the world. And I really hope for this place to recover. And certainly, I think in part it is right now, because clearly the prices are lower, so tourists start to come back. But we all need to learn from Greece, and this is a great culture with that we owe a lot to, and also that is so pleasant because people are so friendly and the food is so great. And if you plan your holidays, if you still have time to plan your holidays, go to Greece. This is a great place, and therefore we can help them. And also, Doing that, you can see and you can talk to people and learn about how people manage a slow economic collapse. So with that, from beautiful Greece, I say bye-bye to you, and I'll see you soon.